Not yet learned your lesson?
This time, Fenlong, I came ready.
Ready to lose again?
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Earlier today, it was announced that O'Shea Jones, who just signed to MVP, will be battling Elia Carranza for the second time in a rematch of their initial meeting that ended in a split decision awarded to O'Shea Jones. On that undercard, we're going to be seeing Tiara Brown make her MVP debut, Evelyn Bermudez make her MVP debut. It looks like Jasmine Ortega is set to defend her WBA Super Flyweight title, so it's a loaded card, but there is a nuance to it that's sort of rubbing me the wrong way. It's reported to be going down on the Plus, ESPN Plus, which is not the same as ESPN Linear. On the Plus, they showed Harper versus Dubois. But you had to have ESPN Linear to watch Baumgartner versus Shin, and you have to have ESPN Linear to watch Hearn versus Holm 2, whereas apparently you have to have the Plus to watch this card. And I don't like having to bounce back and forth like this because I recently unsubscribed from the Plus on the premise that the MVP shows would be on Linear. So what, you gotta resubscribe to ESPN Plus to watch this card? If you do, that's a bit more work than a boxing fan should have to go through to watch a bit of boxing. O'Shea Jones sports an unblemished record of 9 wins with no losses and no draws, 3 recorded knockouts, IBF junior middleweight champion, 28 years old. To Elia Carranza, who sports a professional record of 11 wins with 2 losses and no draws, 3 recorded knockouts, having never been knocked out in 13 professional bouts, 35 years old. He's already been there and done that with O'Shea Jones and lost a narrow decision. That was a while ago, actually. That was in July of last year. They're going to be running it back. Elia is going to see if she can come back better. O'Shea Jones recently got some attention for shading Alicia Baumgartner's performance over 3-minute rounds. She wasn't impressed. Neither was Liana Cruz or Tiara Brown, all 3 of which had this and that to say about Alicia. Now that O'Shea Jones is going to be headlining a card of her own, she's going to be under scrutiny like Alicia was just under scrutiny. That if you're going to tell that broad how to do her job, you better do a damn good one with yours. Against Carranza. And not just win. If you're going to talk smack about how somebody else won their fight, you've got to do it in better fashion when it comes to yours. One of 3 champions in the junior middleweight division. There's a unified champion, Michaela Mayer, IBF champion, O'Shea Jones, and WBO champion, Chantel Cameron, all of which are signed to MVP, all of which present the biggest and best fights for O'Shea Jones, who is still flying somewhat low on the radar. The boxing community at large is not that familiar with this fighter. To get familiar, she's going to have to get one of those girls in the ring, Michaela or Chantel, the winner of their fight if they do fight, or separately. Beyond the Carranza rematch. There is that to consider. What else is worth noting is that she's actually good friends with Michaela Mayer. They're bosom buddies. Be that as it may, it shouldn't get in the way of a fight. If Michaela Mayer is willing to fight her old buddy Clarissa Shields, then O'Shea Jones should be willing to fight her old buddy Michaela Mayer. One possible avenue to peruse beyond the Carranza fight, if O'Shea Jones wins the second fight like she won the first one, what else she can do, might need to consider, is moving up to middleweight, where there are 2 reigning champions in Desley Robinson and Kay Scotch. Desley Robinson is already signed to MVP, and she's got 2 alphabet titles, which she's set to defend against Mary Spencer very soon on the undercard of Hearn versus Holm 2. She's within arm's reach of O'Shea Jones if O'Shea doesn't have any luck landing the big fights at 154. 160 is right there, and so is Desley Robinson, so is Kay Scotch. The only other unified middleweight champion, she's promoted by Dimitri Salita. Same applies. If O'Shea Jones isn't having any luck landing big fights at 154, she can always move up to 160 and fight those girls for their belts. She's under pressure to perform, to not just win the rematch with Carranza, but do it in good fashion, because if you're going to be critical of Alicia's performance, you better turn in a better one. We'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches.
Who's a better promoter, him or Eddie?
Very different. I mean, Dana. I think in terms
Why?
of, I don't think Eddie has to, like, they run a business at UFC. They have a model. They have a business paradigm that's their own. You could complain about it. You could say it's anti-fighter. You could say the old system was better and the new one's scarier. You could say whatever the fuck you want to say, but they know what they're doing. And to this moment in time, I can't find a surviving member in the boxing industry that I would really say today in 2026 has the wherewithal to know what they're doing and create their own thing. I haven't seen that from Eddie. I haven't seen Top Rank adapt to 2025 or 26. I've left. I didn't want to do it anymore.
You don't think Eddie, Queensberry, you don't think these guys are
I
surviving?
think they're survivors. They've been around for a long time. I think the old system's dying and dead. I think the old system's heading toward death. The old promotional system is heading toward death. I think Eddie, because of the strength of boxing in the UK and the strength of Matchroom's sports holdings in general, I'm not only talking about the boxing, the fact that they have a portfolio, the fact that he's capitalized very differently than most people's families. Eddie's family's most of a billionaire, right? So I don't think Eddie's going away. Do I think Dana has a smarter, more effective, more intelligent, better capitalized, better television connected thing going on than Eddie does? It's not even a question.
Bearing in mind that Lou DiBella's never been all that crazy about Eddie Hearn, when he says what he says, that Dana's a better promoter than Eddie, is he really? I mean, he's successful. There are a lot of ways to be successful. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the better promoter of the two. And what he's talking about, the success that he's had, well, he's mostly talking about the MMA stuff, which is very different from the boxing stuff. It's a little bit too soon to tell with the boxing stuff when it pertains to Dana and how successful he will be. The context of what Lou was saying pertains to Dana White's UFC, which he didn't even start on his own. That was him and the Furtado brothers. And the success that had can be further scrutinized. I mean, you're talking about a fledgling sport and comparing it to boxing. It's really not the same thing because cornering one market in an established sport would be many times more difficult than just being able to be competitive in an already established sport would be a lot more difficult than developing a market. Something brand new. I mean, yeah, that takes ingenue and innovation, and Dana White definitely had a hand in that. But we're talking about promotion, right? The ability to market and sell a show, sell shows, sell boxing matches. Lou's saying that Dana does that better than Eddie? Was sort of a broad spectrum answer, factoring things into the equation that I don't even think belong there. UFC's framework, which seems to now be Zuffa Boxing's framework. So compare a Zuffa Boxing show and the metrics it generates to a Matchroom show and the metrics that generates. And you're telling me that the Zuffa show gets more eyes on it? The Zuffa show is better promoted. I know it's still early days for Zuffa, but if what we're talking about is who the better promoter is, we have an arena to compare them. I wouldn't even factor in the UFC stuff because that was a fledgling sport. It was brand new. It's much more difficult to carve out a lane for yourself to find your place in boxing, where it's a lot more competitive and you're going to get a lot more pushback. There is an established culture, a framework. It's a really tough crowd. Simple question. If a Zuffa card and a Matchroom card are happening at the same time, which one do you think more boxing fans on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean are going to watch? Which fight do you think most boxing fans are going to tune into? Now, maybe Paramount is a much bigger platform than DAZN. It is. But among boxing fans, which of those two promoters has more brand trust and brand names? Eddie. A lot of what Lou DiBella said in his evaluation seems to have dealt with infrastructure, balancing a budget while creating capital, and delivering metrics to your broadcast partner. Though you tell me, what's he paying Edgar Berlanga to fight over there? And what's he paying Richardson Hitchens? More than anybody else is willing to pay those guys, I'd wager, which is why they went over there. Look at what they had to kick out to get Conor Benn to leave Matchroom for Zuffa. Gross overspending, though of course, when you're kicking out that kind of cash, you can sign anybody, but that's not exactly good business. It's only good business if you can make the money back. I wouldn't say Dana's a better promoter than Eddie. I would say Dana's been wildly successful in his arena, in his field pertaining to the MMA stuff, but that stuff is very different from the boxing stuff. It's a lot harder to establish yourself in this sport than it was in that one. That one was new. Don't you see that the only way for Dana to compete and gain any inroads into the sport of boxing is to form a massive conglomerate? You need Mark Shapiro, Nick Khan, and Turki El Sheikh to back you for you to gain any inroads into the sport. And even then, you're getting pushback. You need your powerful friends. You need people in Washington to pass legislation so that you can form a league, a biosphere. Why do you need a biosphere? Is that so that you have full agamonical control of everything that goes on? Because if you don't, you can't compete. Let's be honest. Dana has needed a lot of help to finally gain entry into the sport of boxing, and so far, he's getting a lot of pushback, whereas Eddie got the same kind of pushback when he debuted in America as what Dana's getting for debuting in boxing, and Eddie Hearn weathered those storms, came out on top. Didn't have to build a biosphere like Dana. People at the PBC taking shots at him, and Top Rank, even Golden Boy Promotions that was on the same platform as him. They were taking shots too. And in the end, he ended up in a stronger position than all of them, because that's where he is now. Matchroom is doing many times better than Golden Boy Promotions, better even than Top Rank. And forget about the PBC. Better than Queensberry. You will notice that every single one of these promotional outfits have now converged on the same platform as Matchroom, because Matchroom was ahead of the curve. So when I think about that and what Eddie Hearn had to endure to get to this point, and what Dana White won't have to because of his powerful friends and the biosphere that he's building, I don't see that Dana is a better promoter than Eddie. He's a good businessman in his own right, but the environment has to be fixed for him to even compete. A lot of what Zuffa's doing right now is just buying up used real estate for a bunch of fixer-uppers. Familiar faces and names, fighters that were developed by other promoters because Zuffa doesn't know how to develop fighters themselves. And we've seen that strategy already. Albeit on a smaller scale with a smaller budget. Ben Shalom and Boxer, with Sky Sports behind it, made it their mission to target Matchroom's fighters, and they actually acquired a few of them. But once they were left to their own devices and their own ingenue, their own know-how, they didn't know how to do shit. At the end of Matchroom's deal, Sky was begging them to stay, whereas at the end of Boxer's deal, they were happy to see them go. Stockpile as many familiar faces and fighters as you want that were developed by other people. At the very end, it's not going to boil down to your war chest, it's going to boil down to know-how, because no matter what, you're still selling the same product as Eddie, and I don't think Dana knows how to sell boxing better than that guy. I don't think he knows how to sell boxing better than Eddie, or groom and develop talent, identify it better than Top Rank or better than Queensberry. I don't think for a second he does as much blow as Asuka. The fuck does that have to do with anything? The point being, there are some things that money can't buy. Might be the kind of guy that needs a whole wad of cash just to get a girl to look your way, whereas some other guy might be able to do it with a few punchlines, few good jokes. Some things just boil down to know-how. In men's light heavyweight news, WBO title will not be on the line for Dmitry Bivol or Michael Eifert on May 30th. That decision has been made due to the ongoing conflict with Ukraine, per a letter from the organization's president, Gustavo Olivieri, obtained by The Ring. The WBO won't strip Bivol, though, and will recognize the contest as a non-title bout. The WBA and IBF titles will be on the line, along with the Ring Magazine Championship at light heavyweight from UMMC Arena in Ekaterinburg, Russia. Why all of a sudden are the WBO taking a political stance over a war that's been raging for about 3, maybe 4 years now? Dmitry Bivol will be fighting for the first time since undergoing surgery to repair a herniated disc in his back. The operation was performed in August and was followed by a 6-week rehabilitation program. Bivol, 35, lives in St. Petersburg, Russia. He is the ring's number 5 on its pound-for-pound list, and last competed last February in Riyadh when avenging the loss to Artur Beterbiev in a thrilling rematch to claim undisputed status. In March of 2022 at a press conference for his fight against Canelo Alvarez, Bivol called the conflict really sad for me. I have a lot of friends in Ukraine. I have a lot of friends in Russia. My family is in Russia. Every day I wake up and read the news, I hope it will stop. Beterbiev defeated Bivol via controversial decision when they met in October of 2024. Bivol won the rematch. Eiffert is the IBF's mandatory challenger. The 28-year-old German scored his most notable win in March of 2023 when he outpointed former champion Jean Pascal, in effect becoming the mandatory. Bivol's last fight in Russia was in December of 2021. a successful title defense against Umar Salamov. He's now going back. I'm not a fan of sanctioning bodies attempting to get political, focusing on geopolitics where everybody's the good guy and everybody's the bad guy depending on who you ask. How long is this hardline stance supposed to go on with the WBO that they're all of a sudden deciding to take a stance when it comes to the conflict? How many more fights do they not plan on sanctioning during the duration of this war? They say they're not stripping Dmitry Bivol. Removing the sanction really only shortchanges Michael Eifert, the German fighter, more than the Russian, because now he doesn't get the opportunity to fight for that belt. All over a conflict that has nothing to do with him. In some ways, it's got nothing to do with Dmitry. The Russians are not attempting to annex Ukraine because Dmitry told them to. Dmitry's not a soldier and he's not a politician. The war doesn't begin and the war doesn't end based on anything Dmitry says or does. So why should that carry over into this? When the United States invaded Venezuela, or the more recent incursion into Iran, I didn't see the WBO or anybody else taking a hardline stance against American fighters, saying they're not going to sanction any fights involving Americans due to the conflict. So why do they so easily do this with the Russians? After the massacre on October 7th and everything that ensued after that, I didn't see any of the alphabets take a hardline stance against either Palestinians or Israelis. The people in boxing need to stay out of geopolitics because everybody's the hero and everybody's the villain depending on who you ask. There's no clear line in the sand. There is no clear moral authority on the subject. You might think that the Russians are the bad guys for attempting to annex Ukraine, but they're just trying to keep their enemies away from their borders. The Ukraine wants to join NATO, and the Russians don't want a NATO nation at their border any more than the Americans would want BRICS at their border, north or south. The Russians aren't doing anything that the Americans wouldn't do in the exact same situation, so are they the bad guys? It's a little bit hard to say. When it comes to geopolitics, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. You will have heard that before, because depending on who you're talking to, the heroes and the villains switch roles. And I'm not arrogant enough to try to identify them for you. I'm not the moral authority on these matters to tell you these are the good guys and these are the bad ones. The WBO shouldn't try to be either, but when you take a hardline stance on this based on the conflict, that's kind of what you're doing. Is it because Bivol's fight, unlike so many of his other recent bouts, is going down in Russia, within its borders? It might be. So perhaps this hardline stance won't extend any further than that. Any further than the Eiffert fight, because it's happening in Russia. But that still shouldn't matter to them because they're not politicians. This is sport. When the United States makes an incursion into Venezuela or Iran, you don't see the WBO batting an eyelash about it, withdrawing sanctions to any fight happening in the United States. So you shouldn't now turn around and do that in Russia. Just stay out of it. The easiest and most objective, impartial thing you can do is stay out of it. It's none of your business. You're here to sanction boxing matches, not determine who's in the right and who's in the wrong based on how you're feeling that day. It's just not your place. None of your business.